So I'm talking about renunciation. In the website, it said renunciation kind of done in a warm-hearted kind of way. And the topic of renunciation isn't as popular as it was. A few years ago, there were quite a few anagarikas living in Manchester. Anagarika is somebody who's taken the brahmacharya vow, that is the vow of chastity. I suppose they're the equivalent of our kind of monastic kind of wing of the order to some extent. It's not quite like that, but to some extent. So there were 5 of us, and for me, brahmacharya, for me living that life was not primarily to do with moving away from sex, moving towards chastity. It was more to do with developing an all-embracing love. Moving away from kind of exclusive love to an all-embracing love, to the Brahma Viharas. That's what my motivation for being an anagarika was. So I'm going to talk about something, the scope of which, renunciation, the scope of which is very wide and very, very deep. The implications of renunciation are very deep, both individually and collectively. Arthapriya mentioned this in his introduction, that we as a society, we need to simplify our lives. Otherwise we are going to be in trouble. Well, the trouble is beginning. I remember seeing this image, and the image was about if the rest of the world consumed at the rate that the United States is consuming, how many planets would be needed? How many kind of planet Earths would be needed to meet that level of consumption? And it was 4. We would need 4 more planets if we all consumed to the extent that the Americans do. And there aren't any more Earths. There's only kind of 1. So we need to simplify. I don't know whether you've seen a film. I can't remember the title exactly. I was trying to think of this. It might be called Peak Oil. And it's a very, very kind of interesting documentary. And it's about Cuba. And when the demise of the Soviet Union, the oil that the Soviet Union was sending to Cuba stopped. So suddenly they had this sort of experience that the rest of the world will have when the oil kind of runs out. And what Cuba did to survive during that time. And it's fantastic. It's a fantastic film, really, because what they do, they start growing things. Farmers in Cuba had quite a low status up until that time, but suddenly the farmers were important. And they were ploughing roundabouts and flower beds that were kind of ploughed up to grow crops. I think on average people lost 15 kilos, 20 kilos a person during that time. Everybody kind of pulling together to survive that kind of crisis. And it was inspiring. What happened in Cuba was both well, kind of challenging, because would the rest of us pull together in that kind of way? But that looking at renunciation in that way is too broad, too deep for me to touch on tonight. So I'm going to have to limit myself. I hope you won't be disappointed, but I'm going to have to limit myself because of time to just talking about individual renunciation. And even then, I'll just be able to sketch out a few kind of areas. You need a series of talks really about this issue. Kind of one talk isn't enough. So at the heart of the story of Buddhism is the story of Siddhartha Gautama. Now, some of what I'm going to say tonight will be very kind of familiar to you, but it's worth repeating some of that story. So we're told that his father had protected him from the dark side of life. He lived in the sunshine of kind of pleasure, sensual pleasure. When you hear of what his father provided for him, you think, oh, that sounds quite nice actually. But it was a very kind of limited existence. You can't keep the shadows out forever. And we're told on an excursion into the countryside, he saw something disturbing. He encountered old age, sickness and death. We don't know whether this event actually literally happened, but the truths that they embody, the truths of old age, sickness and death, he certainly saw. And if you really see something and you're open and sensitive and receptive, you never forget it. He saw something else. He saw a holy man. He saw a searcher after truth. And he recognized what might make a difference. He encountered hope. Now, hope isn't a Buddhist virtue. That might surprise you. Hope isn't a Buddhist virtue, unless it is the trigger for action. Because sometimes we just hope things will get better, don't we? We don't do anything. We just hope somehow something will come out of the blue and kind of make things better. But Siddhartha wasn't like that. Siddhartha was a man of action, and he acted. He did something quite drastic. And sometimes when I told this story at beginners' classes, they're quite shocked at what he did. He left home. He left his family. He left his identity. He left his future. He left everything that was known. In the middle of the night, he left the palace and he entered the forest. I mean, he would literally have entered the forest, but the forest is a symbol. The forest at night is a symbol of the dark unknown. When we commit ourselves, it's always to the unknown, isn't it? When we commit ourselves, it's always, in a way, to stepping out into that dark, into that place of potential, place of threat, place of fear. And as he left, he came out with this sort of song, this verse. Dusty is the home life, the going forth is wide open and free. Dusty is the home life, the going forth is wide open and free. He became a sadhu. And I don't know whether any of you have been to India, but you see sadhus right up to the present time. Most of these kind of wanderers are men. There are some women wanderers too, but most of them are men. Some of them are extraordinary sight, naked and covered in ashes. And now, when we talk about renunciation, quite often people think of monks. And in fact, I went to Google, the great oracle Google, and I put in renunciation into Google and pressed images, and what came up were images of actually quite a lot of Buddhist monks. For us, we might think of, well, I suppose Christian monks, we might think of kind of renunciation in that kind of way. We might think in terms of giving up the good things of life. That's what renunciation means. Renunciation is kind of turning your back on the good things of life. Well, here's a quote from Marco Pallis, a friend of Bhante Sangharakshita's, that sheds a bit more light on what a sadhu really is. And I'm going to read this. He says, the conception of the true sadhu is an exalted one. He is a type of the spiritually independent man who asks guidance of no power but his own inner light, and has passed beyond all that social life can give, whether rights or duties. For him, renunciation implies no idea of sacrifice of the good things of the world. That conception peculiar to European monasticism is unknown in India and Tibet. This is an important point to grasp, lest one be drawn into a false analogy. On the contrary, the genuine sadhu rejects the world with pleasure, just as a man would find satisfaction in taking off a filthy and ragged garment. He makes himself like an outlaw, abandoning the privileges of family and caste in the present, of past fame, of aspiration for the future life, and tramps the highway, begging for his meagre livelihood, drawn by the wind of the spirit. I like that. Just leaving the known, and just following the kind of the call of truth, the call in the night. So in Buddhism, renunciation is an enabler. It enables us to move towards what is more meaningful, what is more essential, what is more human, a more open state where we might see things as they really are. Is our life cluttered? Is our life full of inessentials? In one of Bhante Sangharakshita's books, he says that if you were given a piece of paper, I should have thought of this earlier on, but if you were given a piece of paper and you wrote down, I asked you to write down all the inessential things in your life, you know, all those inessential things, it would probably be quite a long list. That food mixer that you bought a couple of Christmases ago that you've never used, you know, the food juicer, the whatever it is. And but he said it would probably not move you towards giving up those things. So you might list quite a lot of inessentials in your life, quite a lot of clutter, but would you then go on to letting them go, giving them up? I want you to go home tonight and open those cupboards and bring them into the centre. You could have a huge kind of sale for this thing that Shakijanta was talking about, this project. An image I once heard for renunciation, going beyond the world, was where on a warm summer evening or warm summer afternoon, you're out picking black currants. You know, and you see this juicy blackcurrant within a really, really prickly bush, you know, deep prickly bush, and you go into the bush, you get into the bush, you get nearer and nearer the juicy piece of fruit, and just as you reach out, it always happens, doesn't it? Just as you reach out to grasp the fruit, it falls. It falls out of reach. And then the job is to kind of get yourself out of the bush. And each bit of the bush, each branch of the bush has got thorns on and prickles and wants a bit of you. You have to give a bit of yourself up before you're allowed to extricate yourself. And extricating yourself is renunciation. We're caught in that bush. We're caught in that moving towards that piece of fruit, and stepping out of that, kind of disengaging from that, taking the prickles off, is in a way the Dharma life, and then you're free. But most of us, we get in there, don't we? And there's one deeper, a piece of fruit deeper on. I want to introduce now two important terms in Buddhism. Saddha, and Nikama. Saddha is the Pali form of Shraddha. So Saddha is faith, confidence, trust. And Nikama is letting go, renunciation. And these two terms are linked together very often in the Buddhist texts. They come together. And I'm going to explain why they come together. We might have experienced, this is what may have got us to the Buddhist Center in the first place, we might have experienced disappointment. A disappointment in life, disappointment in love, some kind of disappointment, some kind of frustration and unhappiness in our lives. What Buddhism calls dukkha. It's said that the word dukkha is related to a chariot wheel that doesn't fit exactly. So in your life, your life jolts. Dukkha, Very important word. When we encounter the Dharma, some people feel like it makes sense of our experience. We realize what we've been doing, and we're given tools for, anyway, trying to avoid that in the future, or at least recognizing when we do that again in the future. We're introduced to a path. We see what we've been contributing. There are lovely kind of teachings in the Dharma. The teaching of the two arrows. You know, life sometimes launches an arrow into you, and then you put another arrow in. You make it kind of worse. So we see what we've been contributing to our suffering, and we see a way forward. We encounter the Buddha. So the truth of the Dharma, the truth of Buddhism, that's what it looks like. When it's fully embodied in a human being, that's what it looks like. It looks like the Buddha. It looks like compassion and wisdom embodied. The kindness, the interest, the joy, the bliss of the Buddha. And well, certainly I wanted to move towards that. I came along to the centre in Bristol, deeply frustrated with my life, deeply kind of unhappy. I had no idea, in a way, to begin with, how unhappy I was until I found Buddhism. Then I realised I was really unhappy. And but I saw a way kind of forward, and I was determined to move towards that. This is saddha, this is faith, where we move, we know, there's a kind of knowing, we know what we've got to do, we move towards the ideal. And what we leave behind, what we let go of, is nakama. What we let go of is renunciation. So as you move forward, you let go of things. You have to let go in order to be free to move forward. A friend of mine says it's a little bit like what are those things where you get you see them in circuses? You know, your trapeze. That's it. A trapeze. You're on a trapeze and you want to get to the next trapeze, and you have to let go, don't you? You have to let go of one hand to move towards it, and then you have to let go of this hand. Sometimes we're trying to hang on to both things and move forward. It isn't possible, although that's what we do sometimes. Siddhartha, when he saw those sights, saw something he couldn't unsee. When you've seen through your life, when you've seen the deeper kind of truth of your life, it's quite hard to not see that, to unsee it. You can try, because the challenge of going forward sometimes is challenging. He couldn't unsee when he saw old age, sickness and death. And his life, in the light of those facts, his life as he was living it seemed empty and meaningless. So he moved towards what the sadhu symbolized, that freedom, that searching for something more meaningful in life. And as he moved towards it, he also had to leave everything behind. And it's quite touching sometimes in the accounts where Siddhartha decides this is the night when he's going, and he goes in to take one more kiss of his wife and child, and he opens the door. He can't go in. To move one step more into that, he wouldn't be able to leave, and then he leaves in the night. There's sort of an end to that story. He does come back, but it's not known at that time. To renounce, to let go, we need something greater to invest ourselves in. You can't let go, you can't renounce alone. You need something to move towards, something greater. You're giving up a lesser for more. We need something, greater to invest ourselves in. We need something greater to love. I remember with me, when I started practicing Buddhism, God, going to the centre, but we didn't have a Buddhist centre, we just had a room. I would go to the room where the Buddhist classes were on this particular night from work, and I was looking forward to it all week. It was the high point of my week, and I went on my first retreat, and scary thing, I'd never been on retreat before. The first night it was a bit like being back at school, you know, sleeping in dormitories and all the rest of it. But it changed my life. It was only sort of a week long, I think, and it kind of changed my whole life. I saw a different kind of life, the possibility of a different life opening up for me, and I couldn't go back. It was like I'd shed a particular skin and I couldn't put it back on. It was too restricting, too tight. And now I can say this, and it seems obvious. You know, the obvious thing to do is to move towards the ideal, but people warned me. You know, what are you doing? You've got your career, you've got your life. You know, what are you doing? When you've tired of Buddhism, well, what then? When you got this out of your system, well, what then? You know, this is what people said to me. This is what I said to myself sometimes. But the faith I had, I said a moment ago, didn't I? There was a knowing about it. There was a kind of certainty about it. It's odd, really, because there was both uncertainty. I was frightened, and I was certain. I was certain that I needed to do this. There was no way that I was going to carry on living the life that I had lived, even though it was not a bad life. So faith, Saddha, is the dynamic towards the beautiful, towards the ideal, towards meaning. And renunciation is letting go. And freedom is very, very linked with that. When you let go of something, you can step forward, you can step towards something more open, more spacious, something in which you can kind of grow. That's what it felt like. Often, renunciation in Buddhism calls up the image of, I suppose, the Buddha or the monk. It's an archetypal image. The individual dedicated completely to pursuing the truth. Bhante Sangharakshita adopted this life in India. He went forth in India. He left everything behind and he kind of stepped out into the unknown in India. And if you read, he's written about this in his memoirs. As he's leaving, as he's taking the first steps into that kind of freedom, he goes through one after another rainbows. He said it was almost like a kind of an archetypal experience, rainbows, and into this life of freedom. I don't think any other order member that I know of has done anything quite as radical, you know, as that. I want to read something else. This gives you a taste of why people do this, why people leave home and go into homelessness. So this is from an ancient Buddhist monk's verses. So he says, when the thundering storm cloud roars out in the midst and torrents of rain fill the paths of the birds, nestled in a mountain cave, the monk meditates. No greater contentment than this can be found. When along the rivers the tumbling flowers bloom, in winding wreaths adorned with verdant colour, seated on the bank, glad-minded, he meditates. No greater contentment than this can be found. When in the depths of night in a lonely forest, the rain deva drizzles and fanged beasts cry, nestled in a mountain cave, the monk meditates. No greater contentment than this can be found. when restraining himself and his discursive thoughts, dwelling in a hollow in the mountain's midst, devoid of fear and barrenness, he meditates. No greater contentment than this can be found. There's a set of texts, ancient Buddhist texts, they're called the verses of the sisters and the verses of the brothers. And these are men and women who've gone forth. And some of the verses, some of the songs they sing are so beautiful. And you feel the freedom. You feel the freedom and the openness to beauty that these renunciants are experiencing. They're not denying themselves the good things of life. They're really kind of living. That's what it seemed like. So those are some verses from an ancient Buddhist monk. But what about us modern folk? You know, looking around here, how many of us are going to become monks and nuns? And is it necessary to do so? Is it necessary to live that kind of life? In the Buddhist tradition, there are two facets to renunciation. One is the outer facet, and one is the inner facet. And I'm going to talk about the inner facet first. You all know probably that in Buddhism, mind is primary. And our mind isn't our kind of intellectual mind, it's both our heart and mind. Inner renunciation is an attitude of mind or heart. We need to have understanding. We need to have seen through our usual self-centeredness, our scheming, our desire to control our life, our desire to possess, our desire to identify. And when we've seen that, when we've seen that we can't ever really possess anything or anyone, not even ourselves, then the inner process of renunciation kind of deepens. We try and understand that we borrow resources. This ties me in with what I was saying about kind of the environment right at the beginning. We don't own, we don't possess things, we borrow them. We borrow resources and we have to give them back. They don't belong to us. They never belonged to us. Never ever did they belong to us. Even the elements that constitute our own bodies are borrowed. So there are meditation practices, insight meditation practices, where you dwell on these sort of elements. You look at your body, you look at what your body is composed of, you look at what your mind is composed of, and you see that it's borrowed. We borrow the earth element, the solidity of our body, the bones and so on. We borrow the water element, the blood and the saliva and the tears and all the rest of it. And all the time we're having to take that in, and all the time we're giving that back, aren't we? We're giving it back. And when death comes, you'll have to give it back completely. So in this meditation, we imaginatively, and when I say imaginatively, I don't mean just make-believe, I mean we really try and imagine ourselves giving it back. It's not me, it's not mine, it's not I. And it never was. You're not losing anything, you're just realizing that you never had it in the first place. And when you hear the meditation taught, you can think, oh God, you're giving up everything, you will have nothing left. Nothing left at all. But the experience of really engaging with that meditation is you feel more at peace. You feel a sort of spaciousness. You feel more kind of open. You feel more secure, because actually you're seeing things as they really are. It's a reality check. You see things as they really are. And that is a very secure place to stand, a more secure place to stand. So we give them up, we give them back, and with this comes freedom, lightness, peace. Oh, it's wonderful. What we're doing with inner renunciation really is we're letting go of greed, hatred, delusion. We're letting go of those things and we're moving towards love. We're moving towards kind of generosity and open-heartedness. We're moving towards kind of wisdom, compassion. And then there's the outer renunciation. This is the tricky bit. A change of attitude, when you have really seen something, a difference must make a difference. A difference must make a difference. I was saying, I was in the team, the work team I was in, I worked with a Buddhist from another tradition. I won't tell you what the tradition was, but I noticed he had a lot of gadgets and gizmos. He loved techno stuff. And I said, I bet you're attached to those, aren't you? And he said, no, I'm not attached. He said, in our tradition, you can have as many things as you want. You just don't need to be attached. You just don't get attached to them. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. What would that be like if his phone was stepped on? And now, he, not that I was thinking of stepping on it, but, and I don't say that in a kind of triumphalist way, because the same thing, if somebody stepped on my phone, I would really, my old Nokia, I would really find out how attached I was to it. So a change of attitude must be followed by a change in behavior. Do you act differently? So if you are Buddhist, if you identify as being Buddhist, following the Buddhist path, is there a difference in your life? Or are you going on just as before? Because if you're going on just as before, doesn't that raise a kind of question? This is where the cuddly Arthapriya ends and the pokey Arthapriya begins. When I was a new Buddhist, when I was a young, naive Buddhist, I gave up my Joni Mitchell LPs, yes. And I cut my long curly hair, it was thicker in those days. I thought of renunciation very much in terms of the externals. You give up things and therefore you are kind of letting them go. I bought my Joni Mitchell LPs back later. But a change in behaviour, a change of attitude must be followed by a change of behaviour. But changing in behaviour reinforces a change in mental attitude, emotional attitude. There's a danger of rationalization. We say that attitude is the most important thing, and it is. But changing your attitude must have repercussions. Do you see what I mean? It must have some sort of outer expression. If you say to me, I have lots of material possessions, but don't worry, I'm not attached to any of them, will get me wondering if that is true. Oh really, I might say. Ask yourself whether, since taking up the Dharma, whether your life is less cluttered with material things. Are you indistinguishable from any other consumer? We're such consumers, aren't we, in our society? Are you freer of greed, hatred, delusion? Are you more generous? Do you share things more easily? Are you kinder? Are you less prone to anger and irritation? Less blaming of others? Are you more appreciative and more grateful? And answering those questions can kind of indicate to the extent that you have let go of your kind of identity, let go of yourself. You hang looser to life, because that is one of the things that happens when you do renounce. You hang looser to life. You embrace life more. Samsara the world is the world of complexity. It doesn't get simpler. It gets more and more profuse and more complex. And it centers around the I. Everything comes back to me. I was given, last time I came here, I gave a talk on going beyond your comfort zone. I don't know whether any of you were here for that. And somebody gave me an article from, I think it was The Guardian, about there'd been a psychological study done about comfort in our society. And our society more and more wants to be comfortable. Any kind of, any sort of slight discomfort needs to be ironed out. And anything that isn't ironed out, it kind of upsets us. We don't want anything to kind of get in the way of my comfort. You should go to India. That would be good medicine for that, wouldn't it? So samsara is the world of complexity. In the inner world, so in the outer world, it's consumerism unleashed. In the inner world, it is proliferation, the endless cycle of stories we tell ourselves, fueled by anxiety and by greed and kind of ill will. We replay conversations, don't we? Sometimes when I've had a disagreement with someone, I don't know whether you're like me, but I replay them, giving myself the advantage. But it's never enough. Even though I've won the argument in my mind, I do it again, and I do it again. And I think I do it less, but I'm still working with proliferation. We rehearse our lives endlessly, and when this quietens down, it's wonderful. It is wonderful. I had an experience last year where I had quite major heart surgery. Quite unexpectedly, they found that I'd got a heart disease. And so I had open heart surgery. And I had to convalesce for 3 months. So I was sitting in my room on my couch. I wasn't sitting there for 3 months, but I was sitting there a lot. And my life had to quieten down. I couldn't do the things that I normally did. The things I normally identify with, the activities I normally identified with, I couldn't do them anymore. Not at that time. So I sat, and over the days, things just dropped away. And I remember sitting there with the window open, and I could hear the birds and see the trees. My bedroom looks out on the garden, and just the simplicity sometimes of those moments was fantastic. In a way, nothing was happening. Do you know what I mean? It was so simple. A bird would start singing, and my heart would just kind of open. I remember going for my walk. I had to go for exercise every day, and I had to go for a slightly longer walk every day. And like an old dog, somebody would take me. One of the order members or one of the mitras would come round. There was kind of, not exactly a rota, but it's your turn to take Arthapriya out. So I would go for a walk by the river, and the rowers would be rowing, and the dog walkers would be walking the dogs, and the cyclists would be cycling. But sometimes I would just fall into a kind of deep sense of peace. The complexity of my life would fall away, and not something I could contrive, not something I could kind of manufacture. It would just happen. It would just emerge in my life, and I realised on those occasions that the greatest happiness, the high points of happiness in my life, were so simple. Nothing to do with having things, grasping things, planning, just being kind of present to the miracle of life. Now, Bhante Sangharakshita says that there can be no single uniform pattern of renunciation. He says no one has the right to say that because another has not given up this or that particular thing, that they have no perfect vision and are not practicing Buddhists. Different people will give up different things first, but the net result must be the same: to make life simpler and less cluttered. Many of us have so many things we do not really need. Yes, and he says here, this is where it comes from: if here and now you were to take a piece of paper and write down all the unnecessary things you possess, it would probably be a very long list, but you would probably think a long time before actually giving any of them away. Not after tonight, eh? Sometimes people think in terms of sacrifice, he says, that with a great painful wrench you give something up, but it should not be like that. In Buddhism, there is really no such thing as giving up in this way. From the Buddhist point of view, what is required is not so much giving up as growing up. It's no sacrifice to the adolescent to give up the child's toys. I don't know whether you were like me, but I remember when I was little, I thought, when I get a job, I'm just going to spend the whole money on boiled sweets, you know. And then when I did get a job, that was the last thing I wanted to spend my money on. It still wasn't good for me what I did spend it on, but it wasn't boiled sweets. A few of us may want to lead a more monastic life. If you do, I think that is good. I'd like to see more people leading a more monastic life within the Triratna Buddhist order. But I'd also like people to understand what monastic life really is. And I was an anagarika. You didn't say this, did you? But I was an anagarika for 10 years. So I was when I was in India, I wore the yellow robe. I lived pretty much the life of a monk. But I realized during that time that it was the inner attitude that made me more of a monk, not the externals. And that some of my brothers and sisters in the order who were leading kind of householder life sometimes had a much more intense Dharma life than I did. So we have to be careful of making simple kind of assumptions. The monastic life represents a full-on engagement with your Dharma life, and you can do that whatever your lifestyle is. Some lifestyles make it easier, some are more challenging, some more difficult, but you have to change the parameters of your practice accordingly. So if you do not literally leave home, how can you become more engaged in your Dharma quest? Well, first of all, I've got a list of suggestions here. First, the power of aspiration. We don't hear very much about this. It's talked about in the Tibetan tradition and some early traditions. The power of aspiration. So something may not be possible now, but you aspire towards it. Almost like every day you make your aspiration. When there is time, you may even make it to the Buddha. You may say, when the time is right, may I do this. May the opportunity arise for me to do this. And in that way you keep it in your mind stream. You keep it alive. So if you can't do something at the moment, if you can't get on retreat at the moment, for various reasons, maybe you're looking after somebody who's poorly, maybe you don't have the resources, whatever it is, make the aspiration. If you make the aspiration, and it's a skillful aspiration, something will happen. Something kind of positive will happen. So aspiration. Metabhavana. Metabhavana, maybe this is where the warm-hearted bit comes in, if it hasn't come in already. Metabhavana is a great way of renouncing things. Renouncing me at the center of things. I want my own way. I want things to be like I want them to be. Metabhavana loosens that. It helps you to see somebody else's point of view, doesn't it? It's one of our most profound practices, the Metabhavana. Sometimes people want to move on to more powerful practices, but the Metabhavana is such a profound practice. And I would recommend Metta Bhavana on the move. So keep doing it on the cushion, but do it when you're on the train, do it in the cafes, do it when you're on the plane, flying home. Do it on the move. The people around you, the people in the world that you're with, when you're walking down a busy street, when you're in the supermarket, do metta for the people in the supermarket. And in that way we step out of ourselves. Don't take renunciation too literally. Take it seriously, but not too literally. Don't have too narrow a concept of what renunciation is. Renunciation is letting go into something more wholehearted, something more engaged. Sharing is a way of letting go. Okay, those things you don't want to get rid of, that long list that we got together, you're not ready to give some of those inessential things away yet. That's fine, that's okay, but share them. Start sharing things. It's great, actually. Sharing resources. If we all shared resources more, things would be a lot better, I think. The world is discontent. The world breeds discontent, doesn't it? We need to cultivate a sense of abundance. Don't see obstacles as obstacles, but as exercises. And concentrate on Shraddha, concentrate on faith. Faith is a key thing when it comes to letting go. The stronger your faith is in the Buddhist path, the stronger your faith is in the Buddha, the more secure you will be in insecurity, the more you will be able to let things go. Moving towards the end now. I mean, getting on retreat is another thing. If you want to taste of what it's like to have that contentment that ancient monk was talking about, get on retreat, get on solitary retreat particularly. I don't know, how many people here have been on a solitary retreat? Oh, quite a lot of people. Oh yes, very, very good. And on a solitary retreat there is just you, isn't there? We think, I remember on my first solitary, hopefully there's just you anyway. On my first solitary I thought, great, you know, I was going to go to this little caravan on this Welsh hillside, and I thought, there won't be those people there, you know, those people that get in the way, those people that hold me back. It will just be me, like the sages of old, you know, it will just be me. But I brought them all with me, they were all in my head. And I was there for, I remember, I don't think I was a mitra by that, but I was just coming along to the centre, and I was really intent on awakening, on getting enlightened. So I remember I booked for this 3.5 week retreat. I thought that will do it. 3.5 weeks, you know, it's bound to happen. And it was one of the most challenging things I think I'd ever done. I experienced fear sometimes, like I'd never experienced fear in the city like that. But I experienced such contentment at other times. I remember sitting on the door of this caravan. This caravan was so small that I couldn't have my legs out in the bed, and no heating. I went there in the autumn. Anyway, enough of the hardships of the ascetic practices I did. I was sitting on the door of this caravan with a cup of tea, and the autumn light was coming in, and it was lighting up these sort of grasses that were growing around the doorway, filigree of silver. They were beautiful kind of grasses. And I was drinking out of my mug, and there was nothing I wanted. It was a complete experience. There was nothing that I could think of that would have made this better, that would have enhanced this in any way. And all I was, you know, was sitting on the steps of this caravan in Wales. So get on retreat, enjoy the simplicity, get a taste of simplicity, get to recognize what simplicity is. It's wonderful. I think another little thing you can do, a little practice you can do, is 15 minutes every day. Sit and do nothing. Right? Okay, you might think 15 minutes, how can I possibly find 15 minutes? Just look at how distracted we are, look at how we waste time sometimes. You can find 15 minutes or 10 minutes. 10 minutes every day, 15 minutes every day. You sit down and you don't do anything. We did this in our Mitra study group recently when we were studying Ratnaguna's book on reflection. And people really struggled to begin with, really struggled. People found themselves getting off, reaching for a book, reaching to tidy up the room. And but over the weeks, people sat. And then at the end of the study period, people did not want to give up their 10 minutes, their 15 minutes. It made such a difference. That amount of time made such a difference to their experience of the day. Wonderful. You don't need a lot of time to do that. And importantly, restrict distraction. Have periods where you turn off the iPads, the iPhone, you come off Facebook. You can do it. You can do it. And WhatsApp, whatever it is, whatever the modern thing is. I'm an old-fashioned person, so you know what it is. You need to come off, and take some free time, take some time out, and cultivate a simple sense of enjoyment. Finally, this is my final bit. So where does the warm-hearted bit come in? I've written here. The major thing we need to renounce or give up or let go of is the compelling idea of a fixed, unchanging, enduring self, which we need to defend, which we need to feed. Other people are a key to this. Spiritual friends are a key to this. Metabhavana is a key to this. Going beyond this self-centeredness into an interest and a love for others. And the spirit of renunciation is fanned by this love and concern for other beings. So I hope you've seen, at least from my point of view, that renunciation is definitely not giving up the good things of life, but actually stepping out and embracing them, stepping out towards them, stepping out into freedom. Renunciation popularly can be seen as sort of something that kind of cramps you, when in fact ordinary life does that. The so-called freedoms to shop and to consume cramp us. We need to step out. We need to let go. So good luck with that.